are AWS's distributed firewall. And the most important thing to know about a distributed firewall, or in fact, most firewalls, is that they are what's called stateful. That means that a request that comes from one direction automatically sets up permissions for the response to that request from the other direction. And that saves you a lot of trouble because it saves you having to set up a set of rules for inbound and outbound access. So let's just look at what firewalls do, what security groups do. We'll start with our VPC, and we'll start with seven instances inside that VPC. I'm going to choose that 4 of those instances are web servers, and stuff on the internet wants to talk to those web servers. And 3 of those instances are back-end servers, and the web servers want to talk to the back-end servers. So let's put them in some logical groups. In this case, I'm going to put them in a my web servers group, that's the top one, and I'm going to put them in a my backends group, that's the bottom one. Now let's lay some rules over these. For the my web servers group, I want a rule that says allow web traffic from anywhere. That's sort of a sensible thing for a web server. But for the backend group, I want a rule that says only allow communication from my web servers. I don't want anything else to talk to those back-end servers. That's security groups. Let's look at how you configure them. Well, you go into security groups on the VPC environment, and you create them. And in this case, I created an inbound rule that says port 80 HTTP web traffic is allowed from anywhere. And I've assigned that to the My Web Servers group. For the My Backends group, I have a rule that says traffic is allowed from the My Web Servers group. And in fact, if you look, I don't give IP addresses, I give a specific security group ID, and that ID matches the ID of the My Web Servers group. This is a really important feature of security groups, especially when you start scaling servers up and down. You don't have to worry about IP addresses of the servers. If the servers live in the security group, then you refer to the security group, and that is the decision that we make about firewalling. Now, that didn't move forwards. Now, I've talked about security groups, and I'm going to touch on NACLs. Why I say I'm going to touch on NACLs is because really what I want to do is I want to highlight the difference between a security group and a NACL. Security groups are stateful and they're really firewalls. NACLs are just network control lists. They really should be used only for very coarse-grained decisions like I don't want any traffic from that network, or I only want to allow traffic from this particular IP range. And most importantly, they're stateless. Just because you've allowed traffic in one direction doesn't mean that the traffic in the other direction is permitted. In fact, if you don't explicitly allow things in both directions, you're going to start getting into difficulties. NACLs should be relatively short. If you start finding that you've built NACLs with long, complex sets of rules around ports and IP addresses, you've probably started configuring security groups instead, but we're using NACLs. So please, NACLs are coarse-grained controls and they only work around the edges of networks. Now, we've talked about the tools for creating security, for controlling flow of data, but we haven't talked about how you look at it, and that's flow logs. Flow logs work at a VPC level, at a subnet level, or at an instance level. I can inspect any of those 3 items, or all of them, and I write my output to either an S3 bucket or a CloudWatch log. It's really useful for providing visibility into what's going on my network, troubleshooting if I've set up the wrong rule, or analysing traffic flows. And I stress analysing traffic flows because flow logs do not contain the payload's data of your packets. They only contain the description about the packet, the addressing, etc., the metadata, and we're going to look at that in a minute. But just before we look at that, let's look at how we configure them. We go to our VPC, we click on the flow logs tab, we create a flow log, and we say whether the destination is S3 or CloudWatch. It really is that simple. Now, what does a flow log look like? Well, for anybody who's ever done network troubleshooting, it's page and numbers. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive down into one of those, and we're just going to translate it into English. Now, I have blurred out a section because that came from my account. Every flow log also contains the account that the traffic was seen on, and that's quite useful if you've got many accounts. In this case, the flow log tells me the network interface that the data was seen on, the source IP address and the source port. This is a public IP address in this case, and it's coming from a high number port, so I know that this is from public address 210 blah blah blah. It has the destination IP address and port. In this case, the destination IP address is inside my VPC, and it's port 22, which is SSH. It has the number of bytes that was, and it tells me whether that was an accept or reject. Now that gives me almost my entire sentence, but I have to work one bit out. I work out that if it's destined for SSH inside my VPC, then this was inbound data from the public internet to SSH. That's really useful. If I'm not working, I can put a flow log on and see why traffic is being blocked. Now, I very, very quickly talked about all of the components that go into building